Hi everyone, thank you for joining us today for the Asia workshop. Many thanks to LSI for having us here, and we're certainly excited for LSI Asia in Singapore that's going to take place in June. I am CJ from the Singapore Economic Development Board, and I'm excited to offer you a teaser of Singapore, as well as insights on how you can leverage Asia Pacific for growth. Now, before I begin, I wanted to provide a quick introduction to the Singapore Economic Development Board. We are the lead government agency in Singapore tasked with developing and executing Singapore's economic development strategy. This includes a blend of both investment facilitation as well as industry development. So in short, if you're interested in learning about how Singapore can play a role in your global strategy, we'll be the right people to speak to. Now, today's session will comprise of two parts. Firstly, a presentation on EDB's views on why companies should consider Singapore as you think about Asia Pacific. And secondly, a panel session with my esteemed guests over here, where you get to hear more about their views on what Asia Pacific has to offer. Now, without further ado, let me jump into a quick sharing on Singapore. I'll walk you through three key segments. Firstly, an overview of Singapore's medtech industry. Secondly, a quick dive into our manufacturing ecosystem. And lastly, an overview of our innovation ecosystem and how we're thinking about the next round of growth. So starting with Asia, Asia now happens to be the world's fastest growing and second largest market for medtech. In fact, more than 60% of the world's population will be in Asia by 2030, with 1 in 4 aged 60 or above and at higher risk of living with a chronic disease. And future numbers look great, as the market is expected to continue growing at 10.5% CAGR until 2030. And Singapore is conveniently located at the heart of Asia Pacific. Over the past 2 decades, we have emerged as one of the best places for companies to access Asia and its growth, offering healthcare companies a gateway to Asia with our proximity, vibrancy, as well as a pro-business, stable, and neutral operating environment. So let me provide you a snapshot of Singapore's medtech industry today. Starting with the broader biomedical industry in Singapore, which is one which we have built device by device, company by company over the past 2 decades. And this slide over here provides an overview of the vibrancy and diversity of the ecosystem in Singapore today. We house functions ranging from manufacturing, R&D, as well as regional headquarter activities. Key stakeholders in our ecosystem range from MNCs to startups and sporting players such as contract manufacturers and product development houses, making Singapore a conducive location to provide a wide variety of services and solutions to medtech companies. Towards the future, we also aim to be a hub for product and process innovation and to increase resilience of the ecosystem through enhanced collaborations with local stakeholders such as suppliers and system integrators. And underpinning the growth of our medtech sector is our 16,000-strong workforce, comprising of highly skilled technicians as well as scientists, researchers. And we are committed to building a robust talent pool to support the growing needs of the sector, whether in quantity or quality. A couple of channels that companies can look out for talent. First, our institutes of higher learning, which add more than 25,000 graduates to the talent pipeline every year, working closely with us to shape curriculum and training programs as talent needs evolve. There's also a huge pool of over 400,000 people in adjacent industries that could be easily retrained for the medtech sector, coming from energy and chemicals, electronics, as well as the aerospace sectors. And lastly, our network of 16 national research institutes that work with companies to address medtech-specific problem statements across software, hardware, product R&D, manufacturing process improvement. They also hold significant expertise and a talent base that the sector can tap on. Now let me tap on our manufacturing ecosystem. The medtech sector in Singapore has seen a strong trajectory of upward growth with a manufacturing output of $14 billion in 2023. Currently has over 400 companies with over 35 manufacturing plants. Our medtech industry covers 4 key verticals, with many of the top medtechs having manufacturing operations here. These companies' operations are often the top performing across a multinational's global manufacturing network. For example, Agilent, which Agilent Singapore facility, was the first among its 28 sites to be recognized as a World Economic Forum Lighthouse for effectively adopting Industry 4.0 technologies, leading to improvements such as in productivity and output by 60% and 80% respectively. Other top players like Medtronic, Edwards, and ResMed also have a manufacturing base in Singapore, complemented by R&D for product or process development, or both. And underpinning this manufacturing base is a vibrant supplier ecosystem of more than 2,700 precision engineering and EMS providers. Many of these suppliers have a full suite of design, prototyping, production, and supply chain management capabilities, which makes it easy for medtech companies to tap into a suite of turnkey solutions to complement existing manufacturing operations or for co-innovation to develop new products or processes. For example, Leica Microsystems, a leading microscopy and scientific instrumentation company that is part of Danaher, manufactures its surgical microscopes in Singapore by tapping on local suppliers to supply high-precision components that are key for its products. So when you think of manufacturing in Singapore, think of us as a location that can support your best-in-class operations, your supply chain operations, and also as a location where you can find partnerships with product owners to drive business growth. Moving on to innovation. Innovation is core to our ambition as a leading medtech hub, and Singapore has built up a strong track record of leading medtech companies choosing to do R&D here, undertaking key process and product development activities for the global network. We now have more than 25 R&D centers across leading companies, launching products from Singapore for global markets. For example, WS Audiology, a global leader in the hearing aid industry, operates the second largest R&D team in Singapore. And the team has been instrumental in product development for hearing aids, chargers, rechargeability technology, and so on. Last year, WS Audiology announced that it will be establishing its third audiological research lab in Singapore to conduct research for the Asian population. And why are companies choosing to innovate in Singapore? 3 reasons. First, our strong talent pool. Second, our reputation for trust and quality. We have a solid IP regime in place, ranking among the top 5 globally for the strength of our IP protection since 2014. And this is complemented by a robust and streamlined regulatory process, with our health regulatory agency being designated as a WHO-listed authority. And third, a vibrant and supportive ecosystem consisting of a rapidly growing base of startups, incubators, and investors, as well as research and clinical partners that support medtech productization and commercialization. Now, one of the key areas of innovation that is top of mind for us, and probably for you as well, is how AI will be driving the next wave of medtech innovation. And in line with our vision to be a leading global medtech hub, we are very keen for Singapore to be the leading ecosystem in Asia, for companies to develop and to drive the adoption of AI-enabled healthcare solutions. Our ambitions are well supported by Singapore's national AI strategy, where we have stated that we'll be investing over $750 million over the next 5 years into AI compute, talent, and industry development. And our robust and established digital and semiconductor ecosystems put us in good stead to capture opportunities in AI. In terms of compute capacity, Singapore is a leader in Southeast Asia, with 50% of Southeast Asia's data center capacity hosted in Singapore. Our semiconductor sector is also home to over 20 wafer fabs, which account for 5% of global wafer fab capacity, almost similar to the total capacity in the whole of Europe. The sector also serves as a pillar that enables the development of medtech products with ready partners that can do IC design for chips that go into medical wearables and fabrication of biomems. As we talk about the tech stack in the digital industry, Singapore has developed a stack of our own to provide medtech companies a one-stop shop for AI-enabled R&D. There are 5 essential building blocks: firstly, access to clinical data; secondly, industry expertise; thirdly, R&D capabilities; fourthly, talent; and lastly, a vibrant healthcare innovation ecosystem. We unfortunately don't have time to go in depth into all of them today, but if there's any of the building blocks that you're interested to find out more about, we'll be happy to double click on them after this whole session. So with this, we've come to the end of the first part. Hopefully, you'll take away 3 key messages. First, Singapore is a keynote to capture medtech opportunities for the Asia Pacific region, especially in the next bound growth of, especially in the next bound of growth like AI in medtech. Secondly, we have a strong track record of companies tapping the ecosystem to set up manufacturing and or to enhance their existing supply chains, as well as to undertake product and process R&D. And lastly, we are happy to work with you to discover these opportunities and to support you in growing your operations, whether in Singapore or Asia Pacific. If you're interested to learn even more about our MedTech ecosystem, we welcome you to review some business resources we have put together, or to head down to LSI Asia in June. Please also feel free to reach out to me and my colleagues here, either after this or at our booth. So now we'll move on to the second part of the session. We have our panelists here, and maybe we'll start off with a quick introduction. All right,
we'll start. All right, yeah, thank you very much. Thanks for inviting me to be on the panel, and thanks also to the LSI crew for putting on another amazing show. It's great to be here again this year. My name is Ryan McGuinnes. I'm Commercial General Manager at Triple Ring. Triple Ring is a corporate growth lab. Our headquarters are in Silicon Valley. We also have offices in Boston. And we create growth drivers for large corporations in the medtech and life science sectors. And we do this through forming strategic partnerships in new entities that are funded from the balance sheet. And often we bring in external capital to move these things along. And the reason we do this is to help large corporations manage their 2 to 4 year innovation gaps and to create streams of growth that are long-term and sustainable. At Triple Ring, we also partner with select well-funded startups that are often attached to venture firms that we're close to. And Maher is an example of one of those companies. So thanks.
Thanks for having me along, inviting me onto the panel. I'm Maher Khaled. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Luminoma Diagnostics. We're developing a skin cancer diagnostic aid that's on the basis of Raman spectroscopy. As Ryan said, we're accessing his expertise at Triple Ring. The IP came out of the University of Auckland. I've spent some time in a number of startups in both Australia and New Zealand, from pre-company formation, prototyping, talking to product development companies. Is there an opportunity here? All the way through to management consulting from McKinsey into J&J and Philips. So got a broad experience from formation to acquisition.
Thanks, Vijay. Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Charlene from Enterprise Singapore. Enterprise Singapore is a Singapore government trade agency that helps to grow Singapore enterprises. And you do have offices in the US, and our main role is to help them, Singapore companies in general, internationalize and expand in the US. Yeah, and I'm based in LA. Yeah.
Hi everyone. Myself, I'm John. I'm from the Singapore EDB, so colleagues with CJ over there. I lead the MedTech industry cluster in Singapore. So I've had last couple of years working with many companies all over the world to consider Singapore as their base for MedTech to grow in Asia, including many from the US, of course. Nice to be here.
Thank you. So maybe we'll start with Ryan. Ryan, you've had the opportunity to partner MedTech space across North America, Europe, and APAC in their innovation journey, including with Luminoma. What would you say are distinct factors in APAC's MedTech ecosystem that US companies should be aware of?
Yeah, the APAC region, as you mentioned, is a very large block of economic activity, especially in healthcare, right? And the world's population is largely centered around the Asian Pacific region. And so for that reason, it is an incredibly important market and set of markets to be accessing. And what is striking from our position in Silicon Valley as we try to innovate, not just in North America, but also around the Pacific Rim, is that there's fantastic ideas coming from all over the Pacific region. They're very skilled and smart people. And there are big needs that need to be met or are unmet at this time. And so it's a very fertile ground for innovating for us, and we like to be involved in innovation, and that's what we're good at. And I think we'll talk about it a bit more. Our focus for the last dozen years has been on primarily on Japan and helping to build up the innovation ecosystem in Japan. It's been a fantastic experience and amazing to watch these things grow over time.
Well, over to you, Maher. You've been operating for quite a bit of time in the Australian New Zealand region. As part of the broader APAC strategy, what are one or two things that companies should take note of in that part of the in the part of the world?
Okay, so as Ryan said, there's an innovation ecosystem there that's thriving. I think the two things we'll just say is that it is established. There are companies like ResMed, Cochlear, and in New Zealand, there's Fisher & Paykel Healthcare, and these companies have market caps ranging from $12 billion US to $34 billion US. So there's established big players, and underneath them, there are a range of innovators who are developing products and looking to enter the US market or be acquired by strategics. I personally have worked at ResApp Health, which had a range of developed a smartphone app that diagnosed a range of respiratory diseases, and that was I partnered it with a range of big pharma companies, and eventually it was acquired by Pfizer. So there's innovation there that is attractive to multinationals. And probably the second thing is I'd talk about is the IP that's coming out of the universities there that fuels all of this, that seeds these companies. Australia, depending upon the rankings, has between 6 and 9 universities in the top 100 in the world. And New Zealand has 1, sometimes 2. So for a small population, they're definitely punching well above their weight in IP and ideas. And from there, there's a good innovation ecosystem that's supported by early stage venture capital.
Thanks, Maher. And maybe moving on to John. John, we've seen many global companies set up in Singapore to access Asia Pacific. What are some of the reasons they are telling you for why they are growing their footprint in Singapore?
Yeah, I think fundamentally there are two reasons why global companies are considering a base in Asia. Thematically, growth and resilience. I think Asia has always presents itself as a long-term growth opportunity. And, CJ presented slides earlier on around, I remember the numbers, around 150 billion, growing to 225 billion. So there's a lot of growth potential as well. But besides growth, I think it's about resilience. And, it's how to actually position their global companies or startups even for the future. And one part of that growth definitely is around talent. So if you look at Asia, Asia presents itself a huge capacity for talent growth. India and China, you've got 1 to 2 million graduates, engineering graduates a year. Think about the magnitude of those numbers. Yeah, and these can funnel, I think, the talent pipeline for companies looking to capture that growth in Asia. The second aspect related to that strategy is around the supply base, which is really critical for an industry like MedTech. We've seen a lot of companies expand into North Asia in the last couple of years, but increasingly as well, we are seeing companies form that supply base into South Asia, Southeast Asia, and this is something that we look for as well. But I think to expand into any location, including Asia, there are lots of complexities involved, especially if you're a young startup or even if you're a larger company. Moving into any other foreign jurisdiction is not easy. So we do see companies actually consider Singapore as a trusted kind of a neutral location for them to stage for that growth opportunity in Asia. In Singapore, we've got 6,000 US MNCs that have been there. So there's a lot of familiarity with operating in Singapore.
Thanks, John. Yeah, I think Asia Pacific definitely is a very heterogeneous region, and it's great that we have folks from EDB that can navigate you through Singapore. We have Maher that can take you through Australia, New Zealand. For Japan, Ryan, who is very experienced, has done quite a bit of work there. I thought to just ask Ryan, how was your experience when working in the Japan MedTech ecosystem bit? And what are some of the key points that you would like to highlight to the audience here today?
Yeah, as I'd mentioned, so we've been involved for the last 12 years or so in helping out develop the healthcare the innovation ecosystem in Japan. And it's been an amazing journey. We do this through a set of trade missions, essentially, that are now run by a group called the U.S.-Japan Healthcare Connection. And what we've been involved with is a number of ministries inside of Japan, the government, but also the large corporates all around Japan, and helping them to build up an innovation ecosystem around medtech and life sciences and access the global talent pool and supply chains, ultimately trying to get into the United States as the largest medtech market on the planet. And to watch a group of, or a country evolve over a relatively short period of time, a decade or so, from an ecosystem that had very few entrepreneurs, was a bit risk averse, famously, to a point now where they're on a very steep trajectory of innovation and supporting early innovation and taking risks that were unusual or unheard of a dozen years ago. And from our perspective, working across borders, there's a little bit of a barrier to cross over culturally, but in healthcare broadly, med device and life sciences specifically, this is a global community that is very mission driven. And so it doesn't take long to get over these cultural barriers and realize that we're all trying to do the same thing. We're all trying to better healthcare, to help patients, and to distribute healthcare more broadly. And so then it becomes quite easy. The relationships are actually, I think, much easier to form in this industry than in many others. So it's been a very positive experience for us.
Thanks, Ryan. Charlene, on the point of cultural barriers, you definitely work with plenty of Singapore-based companies that collaborate with U.S. companies. They are trying to enter the region, and you definitely see a lot of these cultural differences. What are some of the most successful strategies that companies adopt to overcome these cultural barriers, as well as to de-risk their entry into Asia Pacific?
Yeah, thanks, TJ. Yeah, I think, you rightly mentioned that the APAC region is very, it's not homogenous like the US, right? There's a lot of challenges, different regulatory barriers, language barriers, and also I think reimbursement systems were not the same, right? So I think for any, US company who wants to actually branch out into Asia and to actually, they have a ready product to sell. I think, most established channels like distributors, consultants are the way to go. But I think if we are talking about a new medical device or an innovation, you do need partners to actually scale up and commercialize. So we do have some partners in Singapore that can help to accelerate the process. I think one of it is the National Healthcare Innovation Center, which also works with, local and foreign, companies to help, establish like clinical validation for the Asian market, right? For example, go-to-market strategies, offering mentorship. We also have, this new initiative called MedTech Catapult, which actually links up contract manufacturers to actually, US MedTech device companies who want to scale up as well. And all these contract manufacturers or, ecosystem partners would also have networks to the greater Southeast Asian region. So we're not only looking at Singapore as just the base, but also the surrounding region as well. I think with that, I think it does help to, de-risk the entry into Asia, especially when there's one central node that helps to, track out your path and expansion as well. Yeah, and I think other than that, I also wouldn't discount like the regional pitching sessions, where I think startups or, even smaller companies participate in these innovation like challenges or pitching sessions to raise their profile to investors around the area, because these pitching sessions are actually often well attended, by the ecosystem around not just Singapore but Southeast Asia as well. And there have been, successful cases where foreign companies participated in these sort of competitions to actually gain recognition around the area. Yeah.
Thanks, Charlene. John, over to you. There are think there are some startups here that are likely curious about access to funding and customers. What features of the Singapore MedTech ecosystem could those companies leverage?
Yeah, well, it's really great to be here at LSI and just being amidst all the innovation that's happening. For us, I think we see perhaps three things that they can look forward to in the Singapore ecosystem. I think the first is, I think, the proximity to strategics. Like what was mentioned, I think many companies are not necessarily new to Asia, but many of them have regional commercial leadership that's based out of Singapore to oversee the Asia Pacific region as well. So that innovation is a very, very close proximity to these large strategics. So that's the first thing. The second thing is because of that growth of innovation, not just in Singapore. So CJ mentioned 400 companies in Singapore. Many of them are actually startups as well. But imagine a small country like Singapore having 400. In the whole of Asia, there's going to be thousands of them. And because of that, the innovation that's happening there, I think we're seeing corporates as well set up corporate venture units in Singapore, ready to look out at the opportunities and scouting technologies. And alongside that, I think funding has grown in Singapore as well. So for Singapore, just in 2022 alone, the startups in Singapore captured $1.2 billion of funding. And alongside that, I think we're seeing venture firms alongside the corporate venture firms that are setting up in Singapore to tap that growth. So, for example, J Labs set up a unit in Singapore as well to actually shepherd innovation from the Asia region into the global commercialization engine. The last piece I think that startups can look forward to in Singapore is what Charlene mentioned. Which is, I think, the proximity to supply base. And, finding a supplier in Asia sometimes can be a needle in a haystack because volume is great, but it's hard to actually find the right fit in Asia. Singapore could be a good place to start for these companies because we do think that being small, we have curated the networks a bit more. So give or take 2,700, of which I think we put up about 100 suppliers that are familiar with MedTech. And beyond that, Charlene mentioned we've set up MedTech Catapult as well to actually coordinate some of these productization efforts with the supply ecosystem here. So yeah, I think we have a nurturing ecosystem for startups who are curious about Asia and want to test out their technologies in Singapore close to Asia.
Thanks, John. Yeah, we definitely heard a lot about Singapore's initiatives. But first, I'd like to offer Maher to perhaps also share more about the ecosystem that Australia and New Zealand has to offer for startups, or perhaps even as the people who are here, how can they partner with yourself or with Australia and New Zealand to continue raising that ecosystem in that region?
So one thing I've noticed, I think Big Pharma have discovered Asia Pacific and together Australia and New Zealand a lot earlier. They've had innovation scouts there engaging with the universities, companies, establishing partnerships and providing the resource from more established US companies to collaborate sometimes with the scientists in the university or through co-development leading towards acquisition. And so I think one of the things that innovation pipeline has done is both Australia and New Zealand governments encourage R&D activity very heavily to bring multinational support for it, and both have schemes which involve 43.5% of your R&D spend to be paid back to the company as a R&D tax credit. So any investments that multinationals put into those local companies, perhaps to prove up a product or take it through a clinical trial, they're going to get almost half of that back or topped up by the government. So there's that system there that's been really kind of encouraging those collaborations. And again, strategics are well and truly based in the region, as pointed out earlier. And, I think there's low cultural barriers as well. I think it's a lot of businesses there are used to working with the US.
Thanks, Maher. Certainly very insightful. Maybe a final question to all the panelists up here. What are practical tips that you will offer companies that are looking to enter Asia Pacific? All right.
Yeah, I'll start. The discussion, it strikes me, and this is something that we've noticed in the years that we've been working around the Asia Pacific region. Sometimes it's daunting because it is a very heterogeneous landscape. So many countries, so many different regulatory systems, different economies, and this kind of thing. But to me, heterogeneity also means diversity. And never has diversity or diversified approach to bringing new products to market been more important than now. Right? The world seems to be in a period of kind of upheaval, and you need to be diversified in your supply chains, in your innovation paths, in your funding streams as well. And so the Asia Pacific region has decades now of experience collaborating across a big pool of water, and there are well-established friendships, partnerships that come and go. But by and large, everything you need is a Zoom call away or a lengthy flight away. But we're a lot more similar than dissimilar all the time. And so I guess pragmatically, access the APAC region. It's a very large and diverse market, which presents all kinds of fantastic opportunities.
Maher?
I would say engage with some of the trade and enterprise organizations, both in Australia and New Zealand. That we aren't huge, neither country is a huge population, so they do have good coverage and ideas of who is who in the zoo, and can direct you to potential partners. Universities as well will be able to. Most medical technologies come from those universities, and so they'll know who's in this kind of stable and have those ecosystems. All those countries so both countries are heavily located around heavily populated cities, and there's a lot of integration there. So I think there's a good way of. It's quite easy to be able to find out who you need to be talking to.
I think maybe on Mayor's point as well, also to just maybe leverage on existing resources that are already in market, be it program offices, initiatives that the government has, right? I think there's no need to actually, reinvent the wheel because there are resources that are readily available already to make things, a lot easier for market entry rather than having to do everything yourself. So maybe just to, highlight that.
Yeah, I think I'm echoing the audience to some sense. I think as a startup, resources are have to be very efficient, and I think ecosystems that provide capability for you to leverage. I think you should try and maximize leveraging those resources as far as possible. But even so, finding those resources are not easy. So at least in Singapore, we tried to curate the path. For startups as well. And sometimes we don't do it ourselves even. We work with folks like MedTech Innovator. We work with JLabs, trying to create a garden path for startups who may choose to actually tap into opportunities in Singapore. Yeah, so I guess the message is leverage, and also don't be a stranger. Reach out to us to actually tap into networks, knowledge, and hopefully as well see you in LSI Asia in Singapore.
All right. Well, we've come to time now. So join me in thanking our panelists for providing such a insightful session. And if you have further questions that you'd like to raise, feel free to catch us after this session. EDB Singapore EDB colleagues will be around here or at our booth, and then feel free to catch Ryan and Maher as they head off to the various meetings as well as their sessions. All right, thank you everyone. We hope to see you in Singapore in June.